Hey there. Thanks for joining me today. I hope your screen's clean, your tea's hot, and your soul is ready because this story, it's a ride. And before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you tuning in from and what time is it there? Let me take you back to a quiet Tuesday night that changed everything. I lived in a tiny but cozy apartment downtown walls, lined with secondhand books, the faint scent of cinnamon coffee lingering from a half-finished cup. That little space had seen me through every phase of my adult life. 10 years of saving, hustling, planning. All of it focused on one thing, owning my first home. I'd managed to stash away $250 and $1,000. Every dime earned from grueling engineering shifts, tutoring gigs, and freelance projects I squeezed in between sleep-deprived weekends. No eating out, no fancy shoes, no random splurges. I was the definition of disciplined. That money was never just cash, it was my ticket out. My proof that I didn't need anyone else's help to build something real. A future with walls I could paint any damn color I wanted. But like most cautionary tales, mine starts with the people who were supposed to protect me. My name's Luca. I'm 32. My parents, let's just say they had ideas. Mostly about how I should be using my potential. And by potential, I mean money, because they always knew about it. I trusted them once, gave them access to help me set up my accounts in college. Naively left it untouched because family is forever right. Wrong. Every Sunday, my mom would call me and casually drop financial advice like it was a new hobby. Have you ever thought about investing in your little brother's future? She'd ask, as if it wasn't weird to suggest I fund his startup dreams. My little brother Eli, the golden boy, the walking spotlight. Everything he touched was brilliant, even if no one could ever explain what he actually did. He failed upward with Olympic consistency. Needed tuition. The family coughed it up. New gear for his music app project handed over, no questions asked. Meanwhile, I got a pat on the back for keeping my lights on, but I swallowed it. Every backhanded compliment. Every family dinner where I was the punchline and Eli was the star. I told myself it didn't matter. That I was building my own thing, quietly, safely, independently, until I wasn't. It started with my laptop acting weird, sluggish, slow, like it was dragging its feet. Then came the questions. Not mine, theirs. Still planning on buying that house next year, Luca? My dad asked over dinner one day out of the blue. The market's kind of crazy. Might be smarter to pivot. Pivot. My red flags lit up like a bonfire. Late one night, after rebooting my computer for the 100th time, I noticed something in the task manager. A process I didn't recognize, technical looking, hidden in plain sight. I Googled it, and my heart dropped. Remote access software. The kind that logs keystrokes, takes screenshots, reads files. I froze. No, not them, not my parents. Except, yes, them. I logged into my bank account, something I hadn't checked in a few weeks because, well, I knew what was there. I knew what I had saved, what I had fought for. Except what I saw made me forget how to breathe. The balance, $84.92. I blinked, refreshed, still there. My hands started shaking. I clicked transaction history. There it was. One line, one betrayal. Withdrawal $250,000. I don't remember the rest of that night clearly. Just that I stood in my kitchen long after the screen went black, holding my phone like it might apologize. The next day, I drove to my parents' house. Not to ask, not to plead, just to confirm what I already knew. Eli was there, of course, flopped on the couch in a branded hoodie, scrolling like life had never once tried to humble him. My parents looked up when I walked in, all smiles. That was before they saw my face. "Luca," my mom said, voice tight. "Is everything okay?" I didn't answer. I pulled up the app, showed them the screen. My dad stared at it, then slowly stood smoothing his polo like this was some corporate negotiation. "Well," he said, voice calm, smug, rehearsed. "We used the money to help Eli secure a future, something meaningful. You should be proud." Proud. I couldn't speak. I felt my whole body heat up like I was going to combust from the inside out. "Thanks for your naivety," he added with a condescending smirk. "Your money just helped your brother secure a life." And I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. because in that moment, watching their faces flicker with confusion and offense, I realized they had no idea what they'd actually done. They didn't just take my money. They handed me their entire operation's Achilles heel. Because that account, the one they drained, it wasn't the real one. But we'll get to that. This was just the beginning. After the laughter faded, because trust me, it did, I stood there in that spotless living room surrounded by smug silence and realized I wasn't even mad. I was done. They didn't know it yet, but this wasn't about getting my money back anymore. This was about exposure. This was about truth. When I walked out of that house, I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell or cry. I just left. Quiet, calm, and boiling over. You see, a few weeks before this all went down, I'd had a weird feeling. I can't explain it. Call it paranoia, or maybe just finally listening to my gut for once. Something told me to separate my real savings from the visible account, the one they knew about. So I did. Every single cent, $250,000, moved into a brand new bank. New login, two-factor auth, physical key, no connection to my name online. I left the original account with just a few $1,000s and scheduled transfers to make it look active. I thought I was just being cautious. Turns out I was building a trap. Because what they took wasn't my savings, it was their own dirty money cycling through my decoy account. And I was about to prove it, but first I needed help. There was only one person I could trust, Maya. My best friend since college, cybersecurity analyst, and the person who once talked me out of joining a pyramid scheme in under 3 minutes. When she opened her apartment door, she took one look at me and said, "Tell me who I need to destroy." I laughed again, this time genuinely. Over cheap Thai food and strong coffee, I told her everything. The software, the transaction, the confrontation, the part where my dad called me naive like I wasn't the only reason that roof over their heads still existed. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't even pause. "They used you as a buffer," she said, typing as fast as she talked. "To hide fraud. This wasn't theft. This was laundering." I blinked. I thought it was just, I don't know, family screwing me over. Oh, it is? But it's also federal prison kind of screw over. She was right. The software they installed. It wasn't some parental control. It was full-on surveillance. It logged my keystrokes, accessed my camera, skimmed documents, passwords, everything. And guess what? They'd been opening credit cards in my name. One was active. Another was closed with a suspicious overdue balance settled. My stomach turned as I stared at the digital wreckage. They weren't just stealing money. They were building an identity, mine. On paper, it looked like I was involved, but the truth, I was the fall guy. I barely slept that week. Maya and I started digging. Transaction logs, remote access timestamps, IP addresses. We created folders labeled every discovery, lined it up like a legal missile. The funds they took, Maya tracked it. A single lump withdrawal turned into a dozen lightning-fast microtransactions split into business names that didn't exist before last year. Some were registered to drop boxes. One was linked to an address in Panama. This wasn't favoritism anymore. It was a financial front. And my parents, the same ones who hosted book club nights and dropped off blessed banana bread to their neighbors. They were running a full-scale fraud ring. Oh, and Eli, still playing dumb. Still thanking them publicly for believing in his vision. Still tweeting about grinding through the startup hustle. I didn't know if he was in on it. But he was bathing in stolen money like it was holy water. So I made a decision. I didn't confront them again. I didn't send some dramatic email or threaten with lawyers. I did something quieter, sharper. I met with a lawyer. Then with her help, I scheduled a call with federal investigators. Because here's the thing, identity theft is bad. Money laundering is worse. But doing both across state lines, that's federal jurisdiction. We sent over the folders, the logs, the surveillance software screenshots, the fake business names, the ghost accounts. They didn't laugh. They listened, took notes, asked for more. Within 3 days, they had a warrant. Within 2 weeks, they had a case. I remember the moment it felt real. I was at Maya's place again. She handed me a flash drive and I looked at it like it was a nuclear key. On it, all the evidence in one place. Ready. This, she said, is how you win without saying a word. I took a breath. Then I said, let's burn it down. If you've ever fantasized about the people who hurt you finally facing consequences, this part's for you. The day of the takedown was quiet. I didn't expect that. No music, no thunder, no dramatic chase. Just the hum of a government sedan pulling into a pristine suburban cul-de-sac Maple Street. The house that looked like a Pinterest board had finally made it to the end of the board game. I wasn't there to see it, of course. I'd been warned to stay clear. But that didn't mean I didn't know what was happening exactly when it was happening. 10:42 a.m. The agents entered the house. 10:43. My mom texted me, "Luca, something's going on. Cops, what is this?" I didn't reply. 10:51. Maya sent me a single message. "They're in. Your dad tried to explain. It didn't go well." And at 11:00 sharp, my brother posted this on his Instagram story. "Some of y'all owe me apologies when this all clears up. Family under attack for nothing." Right, they called it nothing. Turns out nothing involved 3 fake LLCs, 6 federal wire fraud violations, and enough digital evidence to make a courtroom go silent. I learned more through the lawyer and federal contacts over the next few days. They'd run the perfect operation until ego ruined it. The money wasn't just skimmed from me. They'd used dozens of identities, mostly elderly folks, immigrants, people who trusted too easily. They'd built a Ponzi-adjacent scheme masked as investment mentoring, funneled through fake real estate flips and crypto consulting. It was surgical, until it wasn't. Because then they used me, and I didn't roll over. Let me be crystal clear, I didn't feel good watching them fall. I felt right. The same way you feel when a bad smell finally clears from the room. Or when someone finally calls out the bully that everyone else ignored. But here's where it gets twisted. They tried to blame me. Yep, my own parents. They claimed I misunderstood the finances, that I authorized the account transfers, that the identity usage was a family miscommunication and not malicious. They even submitted an old voice memo, me reading a loan doc years ago, helping my dad fill it out to paint the picture of me being involved. The lawyer warned me, they're cornered. They're going to throw everything at the wall. So we threw back facts. Maya produced access logs from the Spyware timeline, screenshots, camera activations. You could literally see the moments my laptop was opened remotely, my login sessions being hijacked while I was logged out. My identity slowly ghosted into theirs. We had IP matches, timestamps, even metadata from photos where my social was visible in files they accessed. The federal team pieced it together. I wasn't just not complicit, I was their digital scapegoat. Their entire scam had been running for nearly 4 years. The $250K they took from my account wasn't just laundered money, it was traceable criminal evidence. They took it thinking they were clever, thinking they could ride Eli's golden startup wave straight into a clean future. Instead, they wrote their own confession. That week news broke, quietly at first, a local story. Maple Street couple investigated for financial crimes, accused of using son's identity in alleged multi-state fraud network. And then, it spread. Twitter, Facebook. A Reddit post with my screenshots went viral. The comments were brutal. Some people tried to spin it, but it's still your family. Yeah, that's the problem. They didn't love me. They used me. And Eli, he went into PR mode. He posted a thread. "It's been a tough time for our family. I had no idea what was going on. I'm just focused on building something good." Except Maya had receipts. Remember those wire transfers? She tracked funds directly from one of the fraud accounts to Eli's business expenses, including $12K for media branding and $5K to a car rental service with his name on the contract. We never published those receipts, not yet, but the threat of them that kept Eli real quiet after that, because deep down he knew. He didn't build anything. He was a mascot for the con. That week, I stayed at Maya's. I'd moved out of my apartment after wiping everything. Started fresh. She helped me find a new laptop, clean, secure, untouched. The first thing I did on it, logged into my real bank account. All $250,000 sitting there, untouched, safe. I sat there for 5 full minutes just staring. That number didn't just mean money anymore. It meant I hadn't lost. Not really. They thought they'd broken me, but they'd just built my case. The prosecutor asked if I wanted to speak during sentencing. I declined. I said everything I needed to when I walked out of that house without raising my voice. But I did write a statement. And it ended with this. They taught me to believe that family meant loyalty. What I've learned is that loyalty without love is just control. And I don't owe anyone that. You ever watch someone slowly realize their spotlight isn't a stage light? It's an interrogation lamp. That was Eli. After the arrests, he stayed quiet for a few days. Radio silence. No flashy tweets. No cryptic IG quotes about loyalty. Just stillness. But when you've built your identity on attention, silence isn't survival, it's starvation. So naturally, he broke. A week later, he scheduled a live stream. Yeah, a live stream. Titled Clearing the Air, the truth about what's happening. I didn't plan to watch it. I didn't need the emotional whiplash. But Maya. She made popcorn, logged it on 2 devices, took notes like it was a press conference. And let me tell you, it was theater. Eli sat in his overpriced apartment hoodie, half-zipped hair, perfectly messy, like he'd cried into a wind tunnel. His voice soft, quivering just enough. First off, I just want to say, I had no idea what my parents were doing. I'm devastated. Cue comments flooding in. We believe you, King. Stay strong. Your brother's the real snake. Yeah, that last one stung a little. He went on. Talked about building his dream, how he trusted the wrong people, and how the money gifted by family came with strings he never saw. And then he dropped the line that had Maya physically pause the video. My brother Luca, he's going through a tough time emotionally. I think he misread some things. But I forgive him. Forgive me. I sat there stunned for a second. Forgiveness. I wasn't asking for it. I was protecting myself from being framed. Maya cracked her neck. Okay, so we're doing this. She pulled up the receipts. Remember those transfers I mentioned, the $12K for media branding, the $5K for the car, the $1,800 charge labeled network equipment purchased 3 days after he moved into his studio loft. All from a shell company now confirmed as a fraud vehicle. Connected to my parents, routed through their laundering operation, landed right in his account. Maya drafted a post. Simple, direct, professional. Since my name's come up publicly, here's where your startup money came from, Eli. $12K from Ghost Bridge Consulting, your branding partner. $5K from Azura LLC, same IP address as Dad's shell accounts. $1.8K for tech gear billed under a defunct nonprofit your mentor ran, all funds traceable. All federal evidence, no hate, just facts. Hashtag receipts attached. It went viral in under 2 hours. The screenshots, the logs, the call-outs clean, clinical, undeniable. And then the fallout began. His brand deals, gone. Podcast interviews, canceled. His little startup pulled from every angel list platform that featured him. And yet not a single word from him after that. Because what do you say when the truth is screen-capped and bullet-pointed? You'd think that'd be the end of it. But betrayal doesn't die quiet. It echoes. A few days later, I got a letter. Not digital, a real letter. From my mom. The handwriting hadn't changed. Still perfect cursive. Still perfumed with that same sickly vanilla scent she always sprayed on our Christmas cards. The message, a mix of gaslighting and guilt. We only did what we thought was right. For the family, for Eli. You've always been strong. He needed more help. And the closer, we're still your parents, we still love you. I stared at that line for a long time. Love doesn't steal from you. Love doesn't frame you for crimes. Love doesn't need a subpoena to tell the truth. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. The courts were already writing the ending for us. The trial prep took months. Testimonies, witness statements, forensics. But the prosecutors were locked in. The timeline was airtight. The fraud trail connected to dozens of victims, small businesses, elderly investors, students. People like me who believed too much, too early. My testimony was short, focused. No drama, no tears, just facts. They used my identity to hide money they stole from others. I trusted them. They trusted I'd never fight back. My voice didn't shake. The judge looked straight at me when I finished. I don't know what he was thinking, but I know he nodded. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't in months. Not relief. Power. The quiet kind. The kind you build back after everything's been taken. I moved into a new place not long after. Nothing fancy. A 2-bedroom with creaky floors and big windows. But it's mine. I painted the walls whatever color I wanted. No one questioned it. I hung shelves without asking permission. And every morning, I make coffee in a kitchen that isn't bugged, tracked, or watched by anyone pretending to care. Sometimes I still flinch when my bank sends me alerts. But then I remember it's safe now, because I made it safe. If you've ever wanted to see a mask fall in slow motion, this is that story. Because the trial wasn't a headline. It was a mirror, held up to my parents, to Eli, and honestly to me. For a long time, I thought justice would feel like fireworks. Turns out, it feels like paperwork, like long hours in stiff chairs, like waiting rooms and the hum of fluorescent lights above your head while lawyers murmur behind glass doors. But when the trial finally started, everything changed. My parents walked into that courtroom like they were still on stage. Suits tailored, hair perfect. My mom even wore that same necklace she always wore to PTA meetings, like she thought the jury might see her as a devoted mother. She looked around like she was still hosting a charity brunch. But Eli, he didn't show. He submitted a statement instead, detailing his unawareness and expressing his heartbreak over the betrayal. Classic. The courtroom itself was quiet. Clean, no cameras, no reporters shouting questions. Just a dozen people watching the illusion die in slow, brutal pieces. And then, they started reading the evidence. Not just mine. Not just Maya's logs or the spyware trail or the fake companies, but dozens of victim statements. A retired nurse who lost her savings. A widower who thought he was investing in a grandchild's future. A small cafe owner who sank her emergency fund into a shell project my dad pitched online under an alias. My chest felt tight the whole time. Not because I was scared, but because it hurt. Knowing they didn't just destroy trust within our family. They did this to strangers, with the same charm they used on me. That same fake smile. That same "we're just helping you out" routine. The defense tried. They argued stress, economic hardship, family obligation, even tried to claim that I was emotionally unstable and vindictive. But my lawyer calmly pulled out the evidence, laid it on the table like receipts at the end of a bad dinner date. And the jury, they saw it. They saw everything. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty. On multiple counts: wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction. My parents sat frozen. My dad's jaw clenched so hard I thought he'd crack a tooth. My mom's expression, blank. Just blinking, like she was still buffering. As if this wasn't real. As if she still thought she'd wake up and this would be another story she could spin at book club. But there's no plot twist when the truth is notarized. No PR strategy when the handcuffs are real. They were taken out the side door. No dramatic goodbye. No teary last looks. Just paperwork. The same system they manipulated finally shut the door behind them. I left the courthouse in silence. The sky was overcast gray but not heavy. The kind of sky that doesn't scream storm but reminds you that sunlight isn't owed. Maya waited by the car. She didn't ask how I felt. She just handed me coffee and said, "You did it." I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I whispered, "It still hurts." She nodded. Because it does. Even when you win. Even when the lies are exposed and the world sees what you saw all along, it still hurts. Weeks passed. The world moved on. The news cycle churned. And Eli, he tried a comeback. New handle, rebranded startup, fresh slogans. Quietly erased his last name from his business profile. But screenshots don't die. And the internet remembers everything. He never apologized. Not to me, not to anyone else. And that's fine, because I stopped waiting for one. These days, life is different. I wake up in a house I paid for, with money they didn't steal. I plant basil in the windowsill because it smells like summer and doesn't ask anything of me. Sometimes I reread the letter my mom sent during the trial. The one where she said, "We did our best. You'll understand someday when you have children of your own. But I don't think I will, because if I ever have kids, I'll teach them that love has boundaries, that trust is earned, not inherited, and that family is just a word until it's backed by action." There's one more thing I did before I started this next chapter. I sent a final message. Not to gloat, not to scream, just to close the door. You didn't just steal money. You stole time. Trust. Parts of me I had to rebuild from ash. But I did rebuild. Without you. That's the part you'll never undo. I blocked their numbers after that. Deleted their photos. removed their contact names from my phone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt clean. Not empty, not angry. Clean. You ever stand in a space and just breathe? Not because it smells like anything in particular or because someone told you to, but because for the first time you don't feel like you have to earn your own existence. That's how it felt when I turned the key. My house. The one I'd saved for. Every floorboard, bought with nights I stayed in when everyone else went out. Every square foot paid for with skipped vacations, busted laptops, and clients who forgot to pay on time. But I made it. No one helped me. No one could take it away. And this time no one even knew where it was unless I wanted them to. Maya was the first person I invited over. She brought homemade muffins and a plant with a note that said, "Thrives in bright, petty spaces." It sits by the kitchen window now. I call it justice. We sat in folding chairs that first night because my couch hadn't been delivered yet. Talked about everything and nothing. She asked me if I'd heard from them. I hadn't. Not since the trial. Not since the verdict. They were sentenced. My parents. 7 years for my dad. 5.5 for my mom. Lesser sentences than I expected, but not short. Enough for them to learn that trust has limits even when it comes wrapped in blood and last names. They appealed, of course, and they lost. Eli, he disappeared from social media for a while. Last I checked, he moved out of state. Some low-level consulting gig under a company with zero online footprint. A shadow of his former self. I could have exposed more. There was still evidence, transactions Maya had archived, screenshots of chats, more passive receipts that painted the picture clearer than any confession. But I didn't use them. I didn't need to, because I wasn't living in reaction mode anymore. I wasn't cleaning up their mess. I wasn't waiting for the next betrayal. I was just living. My house came empty. That was the best part. No forced heirlooms, no furniture I had to keep because it came from a real wood legacy. I filled it with mismatched mugs, plants I named after dead friendships, and books I hadn't had time to read until now. There's a sunroom at the back with old windows and chipped paint. Most people would have seen it as a renovation project. I saw it as a healing room. Every morning I sit there. No noise, no tech. Just coffee sunlight and the sound of the world not needing anything from me. And for someone who lived his whole life trying to be easy to love, that's freedom. I started writing again. Nothing dramatic, just journaling. I wrote about the way betrayal doesn't always show up in slamming doors. Sometimes it whispers from across the dinner table. Sometimes it's hidden in a smile. Sometimes it's disguised as advice from someone who says, "We only want what's best." I wrote about being the reliable one, the one who never rocked the boat, the one who always made room for others even when he had to fold himself in half to do it. And I wrote about the day I stopped. The day I realized being quiet wasn't the same as being respected. And slowly, I started feeling again. Not the sharp, sour spikes of betrayal or anxiety, but the soft things, the warm ones. The joy of choosing a couch no one else would approve of. The satisfaction of eating dinner alone without explaining where I'd been or why I hadn't called. The peace of knowing my life was no longer a shared document. I had one last thing to do. I pulled out an old box I'd kept in storage, mostly out of inertia. It held the remnants of a life I used to think I needed. Family photos, letters, my dad's old wristwatch, which he always said I'd inherit. I took each item out, held it, asked myself, do I want this or does it just remind me of wanting to be wanted? Most of it went into the fire pit, not with rage, with release. I kept one thing, a small photo of me at 19, smiling in front of my first job's office building. No one else in the picture. Just me, young and proud and unaware of the decades ahead. I framed it, put it in the sunroom. It's a reminder not of what I lost, but of what I protected. I'm not going to pretend everything's perfect. There are still nights I wake up and check my bank balance. Still moments I second-guess kindness from strangers. Still family birthdays that pass quietly, the absence louder than any phone call. But I don't fill that silence anymore. I let it echo. Because sometimes echoes are boundaries. And sometimes peace doesn't come with a bow. It comes with distance, with quiet, with locking your door and not needing to justify it. Story 2. In order to manage my savings account, my parents surreptitiously placed tracking software on my computer. I had saved $250,000 for a house for 5 years, but they took it away. My father sarcastically said, "Thanks for your naivete," when I found out, "Your brother now has a wonderful future thanks to your money." The money they took was truly so much that I couldn't help but chuckle. I appreciate you being with me today. Wherever you are, I hope you're enjoying your day. If you could let me know in the comments the city or nation you're viewing from and what time it is there, that would be greatly appreciated. Let's start our story together now. Old paperbacks and the subtle metallic smell of late-night coffee were the normal scents of my tiny flat, which was cozy but a little boring. It had served as the background for a single unrelenting concentration on creating a future for 10 years. A continuously increasing amount in my online savings account represented that future, $250,000. I had cobbled together $250,000, penny by penny, one tough decision at a time. I've had lunch with every brown bag. My coworkers left while Alan ate at my desk. Each pair of fading sneakers was worn. Every attractive holiday was postponed for another season. Every more freelancing job crammed into already full weekends. That was the sum of it all. Money wasn't the only thing involved. It was the outward expression of my independent self-control and quiet drive. It was the down payment for a modest area of grass and a plain, solid home. Late at night, I dreamed of a spot where I could finally establish roots that were genuinely mine while I browsed through internet listings. Simply put, it was my independence. With all due respect, my folks were always full of uninvited financial advice. It was hardly the tactful advice of an experienced investor. It was a persistent, vigilant criticism that was hardly disguised as worry. "Michael, are you certain that your savings account is the best option for your finances?" On our required Sunday night calls, my mother would inquire. Her voice was filled with that certain type of parental nervousness that usually sounded more like condemnation. "You know, real estate prices are always rising along with inflation. Perhaps you ought to think about using part of that money, maybe assisting David in starting his business." David, my younger brother. The son looked to be the center of the family's universe. His needs came first. His potential was limitless, and every move he made was a reason for celebration and, most of the time, money. Every family member and acquaintance was informed that paying for college needed a large parental sacrifice. David had a fantastic, ill-defined company concept that promised to disrupt something more than just his unavoidable game-changing success. My own modest accomplishments include getting a steady engineering career, accumulating money gradually, and graduating from college debt-free thanks to scholarships and part-time work. These received a nod, a dismissive, "That's nice, Michael," before the topic of David's most recent grant application or networking opportunity often came up again. My involvement was obvious, the calm, reliable one. The support system is supposed to help without expecting credit or, if possible, help in return. Unaware that they viewed me as nothing more than raw, disposable material, I was the solid, unseen foundation upon which they constructed. There was a huge, reverberating cavern in my blind area. I honestly thought that their subtly manipulative behavior, their persistent advice, and their blatant partiality for David were only uncomfortable displays of affection and inept attempts to mentor their reserved son. I confused their deep-rooted need for control with sincere concern. They count on my steadfast support for a positive family unity paradigm. I grew up in their home on Maple Lane, which was a temple to manufactured perfection. The yard was always well kept. The throw pillows were perfectly lush. The mantelpiece's carefully placed family portraits highlight significant occasions. I could sense the performance seething under the surface even as a toddler. In an almost violent attempt to cover up any less than ideal aroma, the air inside was always slightly scented with Mother's trademark cloying, flowery air freshener. Any talk that strayed into awkward terrain might be cut off by my father's deep, resonant growl, returning everyone to safe, unimportant subjects or, of course, David's most recent success. The savings account itself was a holdover from a bygone era, or maybe it was evidence of my immaturity. Long after I had moved out, it was still connected to my parents' address on paper statements that I had opened in high school. I never got around to updating it. It was simply one of those administrative issues. More importantly, years ago, I had provided them with the login credentials for the internet. Now, I could hardly recall why. Perhaps they had merely insisted on helping me set up internet connection, and I had complied blindly believing them, or perhaps they wanted to send a tiny amount for a trifling or shared charge. It was an isolated incident, a brief moment of parental support or convenience that I never imagined might be turned into a weapon. It felt normal, the family said. Did they not? Did my family not share the first sign? It was so faint that it resembled a ghost. My work laptop, a powerful, relatively new computer that I used every day, started to act slow. It froze files, took excruciatingly long seconds to access web pages, and spun endlessly before opening. It was like pulling a large object through muck. I tried all I knew how to do, including running antivirus scans, deleting outdated apps, and optimizing storage, but to no avail. The problems with performance continued, a bothersome, ongoing hindrance to my output. I was unable to touch it, and it felt like a little persistent itch. I wrote off a small annoyance as a hardware malfunction. The questions followed, more intrusive, sharper, and presented with the same cheesy veneer of worry. Michael, do you still intend to buy the property next year? You know prices are really outrageous right now. Do you have complete confidence that your savings are keeping up? Perhaps you ought to rethink your approach. The kind yet inquisitive tone of my mother's voice on the phone pricked my skin like small needles. During such calls, I would get a hazy, uneasy sensation in my stomach, as if I were being closely watched, and my intentions were somehow vulnerable to criticism and public scrutiny. I attempt to dismiss it by attributing it to my personal anxiety over the significant purchase one evening and resolving the persistent computer lag. I navigated through the list of active processes in the task manager, which was primarily composed of well-known system activities or programs. A name I didn't recognize appeared. At first sight, it appeared harmless. A series of words that seemed technical. A cautious, brief search on a backup device produced terrifying findings. This specific process name or variants on it were frequently linked to software for monitoring and remote access. Software that can access files, record keystrokes, take screenshots, and even turn on cameras and microphones. My blood froze. Why is that on my laptop at work? Had I clicked on an untrustworthy link? Did you accidentally download something? A nauseating idea. Dark tendrils that were both pernicious and extremely unnerving started to emerge from the corners of my mind. Not them, please. They couldn't be. The folks who brought me up. My folks. However, I had granted them access years prior, and the questions and time were different. It came together to form a terrifying prospect that I wished with all my might to deny. Later that evening, I could feel my hands shaking as I made my way to my online banking login. The fear that was growing inside of me was mirrored by the cursor's seeming creep across the screen. The statistics I had been seeing rise for 10 years were loaded in the familiar arrangement. I expected to see the strong 6-figure number when I looked at the primary balance. It was absent. It was a tiny sum, not enough to pay the rent for a month. I let out a choking sound. I frantically scrolled through the transaction history after clicking onto it. Gasps of breath came out of me. And there it was, unmistakable and striking. Just last Tuesday, there was a single significant outbound transfer, $250,000. It seemed like the world was tilting on its axis. My chest constricted, physically, not figuratively, as though a crushing weight had been placed on my sternum. Every breath was a frantic, agonizing struggle, like if someone had wrapped barbed wire across my lungs. This was not feasible. It must have been an error. A hack and error. Not them, not my folks, not my relatives. 10 years of my life were symbolized by that sum of money. My future. My vision of a secure, self-sufficient area. It had vanished, disappeared. The next afternoon, I took a car to their home on Maple Lane. My mind was racing as I tried to imagine a different situation, but the drive was a haze. I was met by the flawless facade. The rose plants were carefully trimmed, the driveway was just sealed, the fake, overpowering smell of mother's flower spray filled the air within. It now feels more like a stifling gas than a nice scent. David appeared completely unburdened as he tapped away on his tablet while sprawled out on the immaculate white sofa. Opposite me sat my parents. As they took in my face their first looks of mild astonishment at my unexpected presence, hardened into cautious apprehension. I didn't make an effort to be kind. I spoke in a strained, weak voice that was hardly audible above a whisper. The fear and incredulity shook the words to their core. My $250,000 in savings. It's gone. Moved out. In a well-practiced show of astonishment, Mother's hand sprang to her lips. How utterly horrible, Michael! Have you been compromised? Did you accidentally click on something? With his brow wrinkled in a convincing display of concern. Father leaned forward from his recliner. Son, are you really certain? Are you appropriately interpreting the statement online banking may be complex? I took out my phone and fumbled with my trembling fingers to find the transaction log. In my hand, the screen felt slippery. I pushed it in their direction, the indisputable proof shining brightly. Here it is. One transfer. $250,000 was deposited into an account last Tuesday. Their eyes scoured the television, normally their mother's face, but I don't know it. So meticulously put up, she was clearly pale under makeup. The veneer of worry lifted, revealing something harder beneath her, and Father's jaw hardened. The show started to fall apart, exposing the calculating, frigid core underneath. Well, Michael, said the father, his tone shedding the pretended pity and adopting that well-known commanding tone that would not back down. We helped a family member transfer, facilitated for the family. My ribs were pounded by my heart. Without my consent, it is facilitated by a frenetic drumming on my bones. It's money from my house. A decade of saving disappeared in a flash. How were you able to? Mother interrupted, raising her voice in abrupt, acerbic outrage. Michael, don't be so theatrical. The money belongs to the family. What belongs to me belongs to you, and what belongs to you belongs to the family. When you were young, we assisted you. We stood by you. We made an investment in you. Invested, I said the word, which seemed like a betrayal in and of itself. My down payment was stolen by you. My future was stolen by you. Then Father rose to his full height, his voice resonating with a little boom that filled the room. With a hint of bewilderment on his face, David eventually raised his head from his iPad, noticing the change in the atmosphere. The term stole is absurd. We required it. In order to ensure its survival, David's startup required a last substantial investment. His future is at stake here. The success of our family. My future. Was that cash? I raised my voice now. Rumble in agony. A developing chilly rage and disbelief. All of my hard-earned money was stolen by you. Everything for which I made sacrifices. A thin, self-satisfied, and blatantly malicious smile curved Father's lips. His steely, triumphant gaze greeted me. I will never forget this moment, which marked the end of a lifetime of covert rejections and overt favoritism. His voice reverted to a low, cutting tone that was brimming with scorn as he drew slightly closer. I appreciate your gullibility, Michael. Your brother now has a wonderful future, thanks to your money. Leveraging assets for the greater good is something that some of us are aware of. I was broken, but not in the way they had anticipated. Pain was no longer the only thing. It was a strange, almost disinterested acknowledgement of the extraordinary haughtiness and the whole and total ignorance of the truth of the situation they had brought about. I felt an odd pressure behind my eyes and in my chest. I let out a choked sound. It wasn't a cry. The laugh was just getting started. A chuckle that came from my own throat was dark, bitter, and completely confused. Their expressions were a mix of bewilderment and offense as they gazed at me. My father's arrogant expression wavered and was replaced by annoyance. "What are you laughing at, for heaven's sake?" With her eyes narrowed into suspicious slits, Mother demanded. David appeared clearly uneasy. He could feel the scene was getting out of control. It was a bizarre wave of dark amusement that was solidifying in my belly, and I was unable to stop it. The laughing was unsteady, incredulous, and bordering on insane. "Do you believe that you stole my future?" With each syllable, my voice grew firmer despite its shaking. "Do you believe you have won? Do you believe you fooled me?" Slowly, the chuckle faded into a grim, unblinking smile that didn't belong on my face, and I shook my head. "You don't know. The cash you stole. I wasn't the only one with savings. No more. You simply sealed your own doom by accepting it." The decisive turning point came at that very time. The startle. The unadulterated agony. The sensation of being completely exposed. I wasn't broken by it. It cleansed me, destroying what remains of naive optimism and unthinking loyalty. It created something hard and fresh. In the furnace of treachery, devastation was replaced by cold focus and resolve. However, this was no longer just about getting money back. It included it. Justice was at stake, and the rot underneath the flawless, polished exterior had to be revealed. They gave a presentation to the world about shielding me from the horrifying truth of their potential. That day, I left their home burning with a clear, cool fire rather than broken. A nauseating reminder of the artificiality I was leaving behind, the overpowering, flowery scent of the air freshener stuck to my clothes. I returned to my solitary, peaceful flat by car. The quiet that was intensifying the jumbled ideas in my mind couldn't last. Not when that program may still be observing and lurking. I cleaned my laptop. Scrubbing away years' worth of files, memories, and digital fingerprints was a necessary but nearly brutal act that made sure no more information could be compromised. I then went to Emma's after packing a little suitcase. In an area of the city distant from the oppressive, flawless sameness of bucolic Maple Lane, Emma lived simply and purposefully. Her apartment complex was older, eccentric, and full of personality. After opening the door and taking one glance at my shocked, pale eyes, she drew me into a wordless, furious hug. Her apartment had a distinct fragrance: vintage paperbacks. The coffee is brewing fresh, something earthy and clean that spoke of real life, not of a manufactured kind. Presentation. It had a secure scent. The narrative came out of me slowly at first, then in a torrent, as the words caught in my throat. Father's nasty, mocking claim, the software discovery, the disappearing money, and the strange, nearly uncontrollable laughing that ensued. Emma patiently listened, her face changing from worry to incredulity to a silent, smoldering rage that mirrored mine. "Oh, Mike," she said in a steady, quiet voice. "I was constantly aware of a problem with them. The David Show's treatment of you. However, this is quite different. Her experience with cybersecurity was more than simply a job. I was completely unfamiliar with this intense desire and natural grasp of the digital world. She was instantly aware of the consequences of tracking software, remote access screen grabs, and keyloggers. With her fingers already gliding over the keyboard of her own spotless computer, she said, "Seeing what you're doing isn't enough. Gaining access to accounts, files, and private information is the goal, particularly if you use the computer for banking or other private purposes." With the help of Emma's limitless supply of strong coffee and adrenaline, we began digging and worked late into the night. Not on my erased computer, but I could lawfully get old bank statements, online account logs that showed when I accessed them, and anything else that existed before the wipe. Emma concentrated on tracking down the transfer of $250,000. After going to a domestic account, it broke up in a matter of hours and spread out into a network of intricate, quick transactions involving a number of shell corporations and accounts with names that seemed like generic corporations. It wasn't going straight to a well-known vendor, David's business, or even a straightforward investment fund. This was money laundering done correctly. This went beyond financially abusive parents taking money from a son to support a preferred sibling. This was a component of a significantly more extensive and intricate criminal scheme. My parents were more than simply cunning and self-centered. They operated a sophisticated financial fraud network as professional criminals. The money they stole from me was only a minor part of their bigger plan, which was either utilized to finance their illegal operations or laundered via several accounts. The insight felt like a heavy, cold stone sinking into my stomach. Their meticulously manicured look, their fixation on appearances, and their unrelenting promotion of David's achievement. Family dysfunction wasn't the only bothersome aspect about it. It was a well-planned cover for something far more sinister and perilous. It was crushed under its weight. Emma, however, discovered something else. Through some digital magic, she was able to get something that was directly related to the tracking software data. Records indicating which files they remotely accessed on my PC after downloading the program were not entirely clear to me. My identity verification files, tax returns, and copies of previous loan applications. I have digital copies of my Social Security card and driver's license saved. My money wasn't the only thing they were taking. My identity was being aggressively used by them. In order to support their fraud network, they surreptitiously placed tracking software on my accounts and stole my personal information, creating accounts with banks in my name, submitting a credit application, perhaps signing papers, leaving a trail that, should their activities be uncovered, may lead back to me. The nausea came back more worse. They had harmed me more than just monetarily and emotionally. Without my knowledge or cooperation, they were deliberately attempting to set me up to be held legally responsible for their crimes. They did more than simply embezzle my money. Thick with terror, I stuttered out the words. My name was stolen. They were attempting to blame me. In this growing nightmare, the brother David continued to be a cruel supporting character. Was he involved? Emma's examination of the transaction flows only linked him to getting a sizable sum of money from our parents, not to the intricate money laundering or the shell corporations. He appeared to be either consciously ignorant, refusing to see the guy behind the curtain as long as the money continued to flow, or really unaware, enjoying the advantages of his favored status without having to ask awkward questions. As a result, he became a key privileged beneficiary of their vast crime, rather than a knowing co-conspirator in the most serious deception. Ambition and the story our parents had taught him all his life had blinded him. But when the whole truth was revealed, I knew with a cold certainty that was ingrained in my bones that he would support the parents. The integrity of their story was crucial to his reputation and his meticulously crafted facade of success, which was based on their wealth. Equipped with the quickly mounting evidence, the indisputable logs demonstrating the installation of the tracking software and remote access, the intricate transaction trails that unmistakably linked the shell companies and their fraudulent network, and the evidence of identity theft verified by my documents, we started to realize the scope of their operation. There were hundreds of transactions, not just dozens, which might have cost millions of dollars, and horribly affected many actual people, including elderly persons who were the targets of fraudulent investment schemes, small businesses that were duped into making false deals, and families who had their assets stolen. My folks. Predators who preyed on the weak to finance their opulent lifestyle, and David's Golden Road served as the cornerstones of the Maple Lane community facade. This is when the phony money twist really took hold, explaining the strange, almost hysterical, almost comical laughing that they had back at home, along with the lingering uneasiness from the first computer malfunctions and strange queries from their parents before the $250,000 disappeared. I had followed my instincts, a hunch that something wasn't right. It was a move motivated more by vague paranoia than by hard evidence. However, it rescued me weeks before. The account they were monitoring, which they believed contained my life savings, was a ruse. I had carefully and discreetly moved all $250,000 of my funds into a new, entirely different account at a different financial institution that they were unaware of. Its balance was smaller and less important. Perhaps a few planned automatic transfers would make it appear active, but less alluring for a full-scale heist. My 10 years of devotion were not what they saw and took that day. Based on the exact dates and quantities Emma was able to track down, they took money that they had just sent through my hacked account. As a quick covert pause in the intricate international money laundering process of their own fraud network. They believed my huge savings level would help the transaction blend in, so they assumed they were utilizing my account to temporarily cover or clean up their dirty money. They spared my future by snatching it out. The dark, cosmic irony of it all made me laugh almost out loud when they stole their own hot money and left a bright, indisputable digital trail that led directly from their wider fraud network back to them. This trail was specifically connected to an account that was associated with me, the very person whose identity they were stealing at the same time. They believed they could pick my pocket with impunity because they were so cunning and untouchable. However, they had unintentionally stepped into a trap that I had constructed, supplying the exact indisputable piece of proof that would destroy everything they had based on falsehoods. Their own trap was stolen. I reiterated to Emma the discovery, which was both deeply sinisterly fulfilling and scary in its ramifications. The choice was now not only obvious, but also necessary. I was not capable of managing this on my own or limiting it to family matters. The deception was too widespread. There were too many possible victims, and I was legally exposed for the identity theft. Law enforcement was necessary. Justice was what we needed. Not only for myself, but for all the other people they had hurt. Together with Emma, we worked painstakingly to gather our evidence into a comprehensive chronological case file that included IP addresses, transaction logs, screenshots of the program interface that were accidentally taken, and links between fraudulent conduct and tracking software access. Shell company names, leads on possible victims connected to the scamming tendencies seen in public data. I first contacted an impartial third party who verified the reliability and authenticity of our evidence, and we had a private consultation with the lawyer. To make sure I wasn't unintentionally implicated because of the identity theft, she gave us advice on how to contact the authorities. The FBI was the right agency because of the size of the financial network, which probably crossed state boundaries. The next days were a haze of meetings retelling the agonizing tale repeatedly and giving the financial and technological proof. The agents were cautious at first, as they should be, but they moved deliberately and methodically as I described the family relationships and the origins of the hacked account, and Emma lay out the complex digital breadcrumbs. Professional indifference gave way to deadly earnestness on their faces. They noticed the network. They witnessed the washing. They saw the bold identity theft. They witnessed the extent of the treachery. They saw the possibility of many casualties. The dramatic courtroom clash you see in movies wasn't the climax. It was justice's icy, premeditated coming. The agents built their case and obtained warrants in a timely and stealthy manner. They scheduled the exposure for a Tuesday morning when both of my parents would be at the unremarkable suburban office building that they utilized as a respectable front for a portion of their business. Emma and I were waiting close, but I wasn't there when the arrests really happened. My chest felt like a real wire pulling taut. The air was thin and difficult to breathe. I saw the situation playing out: the ordinary office setting, the surprise knock on the door, the surprising appearance of federal officials wearing badges, the proper reading. The case papers and Emma's connections eventually provided me with information about their early haughtiness and how their carefully constructed facade of respectable business people abruptly crumbled in the face of government inquiry. The father's face apparently became ash white just before, yet it was probably calm and assured. The mother's well-maintained poise fell apart entirely. The sound of handcuffs snapping into place, harsh and definitive, reverberating in the abrupt, astonished hush. Her voice increasing her desperate, senseless protestations, shifting responsibility wildly. Using the hijacked accounts, they first tried to deny everything. Then they tried to negotiate, and then, in a horrible move, they sought to place part of the blame on me. A last-ditch, manipulative attempt motivated by their refusal to take accountability. However, there is proof, the indisputable trail, that their own hot money went straight through my account. The logs from the spying program that was set up on my PC. It was overwhelming to see the documents that were falsified using my identity. Unquestionable. There was a maelstrom in the immediate aftermath. The arrests, news. As the scope of the financial fraud network became clear, the initial police blotter item swiftly escalated. My parents' meticulously crafted public persona was picked up by local and even national news organizations. The ideal family on Maple Lane fell apart, leaving the fragments all over the place. The social consequences followed, causing a second wave of suffering and phone calls from perplexed family members. While some of them were supportive, many were swayed by years of believing the rumors my parents were spreading across the neighborhood. And my brother David, who had personally profited from their crimes, responded to me with rage, self-serving denial, and wrath, rather than reflection, guilt, or empathy for the victims. With a fury, he resorted to social media to make nasty, false claims out of sheer spite, portraying a stable, respected family that had been shattered by a disturbed, resentful, and envious son. He posted flimsy accusations, misrepresented the truth, and used the very words our parents had taught him all his life, that I was somehow less worthy, less competent, and now deliberately malevolent. He's attempting to ruin us. In an attempt to rally their surviving supporters, he railed online, adding fuel to the public's fire. His total absorption into the poisonous dynamics of the family and his resolve to defend his privileged position at all costs were confirmed by this painful but ultimately illuminating final act of treachery. Hearings, procedural stages, and ultimately trial preparation or plea talks form the foundation of the legal process, which is a drawn-out and emotionally taxing time. My parents seemed thin and elderly after taking off their public persona and confronting the harsh realities of the legal system. They continued to try to minimize their role or defend their conduct, displaying no public contrition. However, the proof that Emma and I had meticulously gathered stood up. My actual $250,000 in savings is still in the safe account I transferred it to unaltered. Among the assets connected to the fraud case was the hot money they had stolen and transferred through my account. Supplying documents and lucid testimony while collaborating closely with my attorney and the authorities. In order to ensure that my name was exempt from any potential culpability related to the identity theft and the fraud network they attempted to blame me for, I was able to effectively negotiate the legal difficulties. Disentangling myself from the poisonous criminal web they had spun using my life as a thread was a long and tedious task. Regaining my reputation was a purposeful, continuous effort rather than a sudden, spectacular declaration. Completely assisting law enforcement, coolly correcting false information when questioned, and ultimately choosing to speak the truth. Months turned into a year so I could take charge of my own story. It was the end of the judicial process. Given the scope and consequences of their vast financial crimes, my parents received lengthy prison terms. The cold, legal type of justice was administered. There was no moment of reconciliation, no dramatic courtroom apology, nothing that would give decades of dysfunction and treachery a tidy Hollywood conclusion. Only the grim announcement of the consequences. The last unambiguous legal line established between us. Emma was a constant, a loyal friend who had grown to be more like family to me than my own family ever was. Not everything we spoke was about the past. We discussed our lives' aspirations and common experiences. Her presence served as a constant, silent solace and a physical reminder of what it was like to have a real, healthy connection. Ultimately, purchasing my home was the most important step in my own recovery process. Although I had saved for it throughout that lost decade, it wasn't the first dream I had, but it was mine. I recall how weighty the key felt in my hand. When I opened the front door for the first time by myself, I heard the lock click softly. The home was deserted. There is a minor echo in the rooms, an empty canvas awaiting filling. It didn't feel lonely, though. It seemed so full of potential, of security and tranquility. The fragrance of clean, fresh paint and the promise of a future I would construct on firm footing were all that was present, along with the absence of cloying artificial odors and suffocating family portraits on the walls. I had my own area, a physical border that is safe and secure. I have endured unspeakable suffering and treachery to prove to myself that the wounds from the betrayal still there. A portion of me is probably going to be cautious all the time. Verify the details again at all times. Always have a bit less faith in others. The suffering of grief. The death of the family I believed to be mine. Even though that family was founded on deceit and manipulation, there is occasionally a dull aching that comes to the surface, especially around holidays or when I encounter others who appear to have functional family ties. However, it no longer characterizes me. Money was all that the $250,000 were. The liberation, the genuine city, and the hard-won tranquility I discovered were invaluable. The effects of toxic family dynamics are widespread, subtle, and extremely harmful. They distort how you see the world and yourself, undermine your sense of value, and cause you to doubt your own sanity. It's not rude or unkind to set boundaries. It's a crucial act of self-defense and a statement that your health is important. Those who share your bloodline and are meant to love you the most can sometimes be the ones who harm you the most. But the first step to healing and taking back your life is to face the reality, no matter how unpleasant or surprising that may be. It takes a great deal of strength and self-love to stand up for yourself, especially when your own family is actively working to discredit you and bring you down. Truth, self-respect, and the bravery to leave behind what was harming me were the cornerstones of my new life, which I constructed brick by brick with years of sacrifice. Have you ever been forced to choose between keeping up a connection with toxic family members and putting your own health first? How long did it take you to establish a barrier that made all the difference?